The BFG by Roald Dahl. Captured by a giant. The BFG is no ordinary bone-crunching giant. He is far too nice and jumbly. It's lucky for Sophie that he is. Had she been carried off in the middle of the night by the Bloodbottler, the Fleshlumpeater, the Bonecruncher, or any of the other giants, rather than the BFG, she would have soon become breakfast. When Sophie hears that they are flushbunking off to England to swollomp a few nice little chiddlers, she decides she must stop them once and for all, and the BFG is going to help her. The BFG is no ordinary bone-crunching giant. He is far too nice and jumbly, and it's lucky for Sophie that he is. Had she been snatched from her bed by Fleshlumpeater, Bonecruncher, Child Chewer, Gizzard Gulper, or any of the other giants, she wouldn't have stood a chance, but would have been guzzled like a whiff-swiddle before you could say Rag Jobinson. Whisked off to Giant Land, Sophie is shocked and horrified by the BFG's repulsive neighbors. When she hears that they are flush-bunking off to England that very night to swamp a few nice little English chiddlers, she decides she must put a stop to them at once. This is a wild, funny, wickedly inventive, golden fizz wizard of a book and will be enjoyed by children of all ages. Roald Dahl was born in Wales of Norwegian parents. He spent his childhood in England and was educated at Repton. At 18, he joined the Shell Oil Company in Africa, and when World War II broke out, he joined the RAF and became a fighter pilot, serving in Syria and Greece. In 1942, he went to Washington as assistant air attaché, and it was there he started to write short stories. He now lives in Buckinghamshire. For Olivia, 20 April 1955 to 17th November 1962. The characters in this book are humans, the Queen of England, Mary the Queen's maid, Mr. Tibbs the palace butler, the head of the army, the head of the Air Force, and of course Sophie, an orphan. Giants, the Fleshlumpeater, the Bonecruncher, the Man-Hugger, the Child Chewer, the Meat Dripper, the Gizzard Gulper, the Maid Masher, the Bloodbottler, the Butcher Boy, and of course the BFG. The witching hour. Sophie couldn't sleep. A brilliant moonbeam was slanting through a gap in the curtains. It was shining right onto her pillow. The other children in the dormitory had been asleep for hours. Sophie closed her eyes and lay quite still. She tried very hard to doze off. It was no good. The moonbeam was like a silver blade slicing through the room onto her face. The house was absolutely silent. No voices came up from downstairs. There were no footsteps on the floor above either. The window behind the curtain was wide open, but nobody was walking on the pavement outside. No cars went by on the street. Not the tiniest sound could be heard anywhere. Sophie had never known such a silence. Perhaps, she told herself, this was what they called the witching hour. The witching hour, somebody had once whispered to her, was a special moment in the middle of the night when every child and every grown-up was in a deep, deep sleep, and all the dark things came out from hiding and had the world to themselves. The moonbeam was brighter than ever on Sophie's pillow. She decided to get out of bed and close the gap in the curtains. You got punished if you were caught out of bed after lights out. Even if you said you had to go to the lavatory, that was not accepted as an excuse, and they punished you just the same. But there was no one about now, Sophie was sure of that. She reached out for her glasses that lay on the chair beside her bed. They had steel rims and very thick lenses, and she could hardly see a thing without them. She put them on, then she slipped out of bed and tiptoed over to the window. When she reached the curtains, Sophie hesitated. She longed to duck underneath them and lean out of the window to see what the world looked like now that the witching hour was at hand. She listened again. Everywhere it was deathly still. The longing to look out became so strong she couldn't resist it. Quickly, she ducked under the curtains and leaned out of the window. In the silvery moonlight, the village street she knew so well seemed completely different. The houses looked bent and crooked, like houses in a fairy tale. Everything was pale and ghostly and milky white. Across the road, she could see Mrs. Rance's shop, where you bought buttons and wool and bits of elastic. It didn't look real. There was something dim and misty about that too. Sophie allowed her eye to travel further and further down the street. Suddenly, she froze. This was something coming up the street on the opposite side. It was something black, something tall and black, something very tall and very black and very thin.